Introduction, three main points that I wanted to highlight. The first, I think it's very serious. If we want to deal with the issue, to understand what happened in Egypt, it's important also to have and to study, to have an understanding and to study what happened before the uprisings in Egypt. The way things were evolving. So we need to study history and we need to study the context, because many people didn't get what I was saying 5 years ago when I was saying and repeating, I'm cautiously optimistic, be careful, is not as simple as that. If we look at the issue through the political landscape, thinking, oh yes, the world is welcoming people in the Middle East, in Tunisia, and then in Egypt, struggling for justice, freedom, and democracy, and that's it. You are naive. You don't get the point that behind this there are other challenges, and among them, of course, economic reasons, geostrategic reasons. We were naive in the way we were very quickly buying the whole things that, yes, these are this is the Arab Spring, and not studying. And my main point here, I don't have the time here, but I want us not to start again, as much we has been hopeful and naive before, to be hopeless and now to give up after. Before and after, what is important in the whole thing is to get a sense of what happened and what was at stake, and to analyze mistakes, to analyze the way we were dealing with the issue. And when 5 years ago I was saying we have to look at the other side of the picture and to try to understand what is happening, and saying to many people in the region, you know what is the problem of Arabs? You know what is the problem of people in the Middle East? Is that they don't study strategies in Latin America. They don't study Africa, they don't study Asia. It's as if what is happening there, it's happening for the first time. Which is not true. If you just look at things the way they can be distorted, they can be manipulated, they can be manufactured, you just understand that the cynical take of the great powers, and the first in this issue is the United States of America, Israel at the regional level. This is not new. The cynical take on politics and distorting the whole evolution, this is something which is not new, but we are not studying, and I would say that it's also our mistake, and by not studying we fail to understand. And I'm not saying that all the answers were there, but at least the complexity of the issue and which role was played by the different actors in the region. Now, we are here after 5 years to think about the way forward. And the way forward is really based on an analysis of what happened and trying to now to think about what we can do. Now, why I'm here, it's not only to talk to you as an observer and just to show some courage by denouncing and being ready to say to this government that these are dictators and and the Sisi is a corrupt dictator and it's coming. It's not new, by the way. Once again, even with him, the fact that we didn't study enough his biography, where he's coming from, that's just unbelievable. That it's as if he was coming from nowhere. We didn't study the fact that he was involved for the last 8 years in many of the key situations, dealing with the army and dealing with the American administration. The American administration knew Sisi much before we heard about him, and they were dealing with him much before. And he was involved in many of the discussions, and it's as if he was coming from nowhere. So here again, I think that our discussion on what is happening in Egypt, it's also for us and for you Canadian citizens, with an Egyptian background or not, with a Muslim background or not, the only thing which matters here is that we are principled citizens, ready to say all together, as soon as you are a dictator, you don't respect human life, you torture, you kill, and you put in jail political, non-violent opposition, we are here to stand up for what is right. Whatever it takes, but we have to be involved. And if you are serious with democracy, if you are serious about the fact that all of us, we sit here and we say we condemn violent extremists. But if we condemn violent extremists with the same voice, with the same strength, with the same vocal presence, we have to support the democratic process. You can't be against the violent extremists and be silent supporting when it comes to support the democratic process and the human dignity and the equal rights for all the populations around the world to benefit and to see their rights being protected on this. Now, what I wanted to say very quickly, and to come to the second part of my talk about what could be the way forward, I just want to say a few things about things that we have to remember and we have to remind ourselves when it comes to the last 5 years. Once again, I'm not going to come to this discussion because many of the things that I said, and by the way, it was when I came to Canada that some cut one of my talk by saying Tariq Ramadan is thinking that everything was manufactured by the United States of America. I said. But what I said is what we thought was not known by the American administration was not only known by the American administration, by the European countries, but even by Mubarak himself, who put in jail some of the people who were trained as cyber dissidents in other countries. These are facts. We have to study this. So it didn't come out of nothing, out of nowhere. So this is something that, once again, I said be cautious, because it might be that the whole process is also having other considerations than only democratization, and it has to do with economic challenges and economic reasons. So I don't have time to come to this, but at the beginning, once again, what we have to say, and you are referring to revolutions and speaking about this, I never use the term revolutions. I understand that Egyptian people from within are using it. I don't have a problem with this. I'm not going to come to this discussion on terminology, even though it's quite important, but that's not the time. What is important is to remember that the whole process started with people taking to the street, not being from the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood were not the people who started the whole process in the streets. They themselves acknowledged that, and in fact, the day before the 25th of January, they were still discussing which type of involvement they have to have in the process. So it's coming from the people, and these people were democratic processes. Why I'm saying this? Because 5 years later, all the people who are coming and saying, we want what was at the beginning of the process, dignity, freedom, and democratization, now it's translated into, if you say this, it means that you are supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's changing, distorting the whole political discussion, exactly what happened with Hamas in Palestine. When they won the election, they were targeted as being extremists, and if you were to come and to say, I'm supporting the Palestinians, I'm supporting their rights, they were reducing the whole discussion. It means that you are supporting Hamas and the extremists. So they were dismissing your point. And why? Because the public opinion knows nothing about the political forces in Egypt, about the political forces in Palestine, for example, and facing the corruption within Fatah, for example, or the corrupt situation within Egypt, portraying the others as Islamists and radicals, you are caught and you don't know how to support. You didn't know how to, for years, people didn't know how to support Palestinians, and for years, people don't know how to support Egyptians, because they are very quickly labeled as, if you are against the regime, it means that you are for the Islamists, it means that you are for the radicals, it means that you are suspicious. So even if you say, no, I'm against the regime because I promote principles, whoever is in the opposition, let us speak about the principles. Yes. You know what is said? Double talk. I'm the first to be labeled like this. Tariq Ramadan is known by some media by the double talk. Which exactly, in fact, who is promoting the double talk is the people who are distorting the whole political equation by saying if you are against the army, it means that you are for the Islamists. And for example, supporting Rab'a, for example, people who were industry, it's as if, oh, it's the Muslim Brotherhood. No, these were people saying you have to respect the institutions. You have to respect the democratic process. And it's not because the people, even if the great majority of the people are not happy with the elected president, is it right in a democratic process to remove the president and to say we have the right? If this would have been the case, we have to start with the French president. We had to do it with Bush, with almost all the presidents. That's the reality. The democratic process is to respect the institutions. You have a mandate for 4 years, 5 years, we go to the end and we will assess. This is what it should be. And if you stop the process, you are stopping the democratic process. It happened in Algeria. It happened also with demonizing the election in Palestine. It happened in Egypt. And the world is quiet by saying what? Reduce all this to, if you support the people who were in charge, it means that you are supporting Islamists, you are supporting terrorists, or you are supporting people who are not respecting the human rights. Having said that, the whole process started and the Muslim Brotherhood came afterward, and we need also to deal with what happened. For me, assessing the situation in what happened just after January the 25th, I was taking some position by saying the whole process and the whole transitory period was problematic. And even the Muslim Brotherhood were discussing, should we be involved in running for presidency or not? The first attitude and the first position was, no, we should not be involved. We should wait and see. And then there were discussions within, and they decided to go for it. And once again, what we had at the beginning is a split within the Muslim Brotherhood themselves between the people who are supporting being involved and not. And then if you look at all the steps afterward, what also was important is something that I think, knowing the situation in Egypt, was a very big mistake. And this is why I think that in political terms, if you are supporting or not, whatever ideology, in political terms, you have to deal with what was right, what were the mistakes. We have to assess this. And there are here things that in political terms are problematic in the way the country was run, knowing that after all this time under the Mubarak dictatorship, to think that things were going to go so smoothly, that you are going to be acknowledged, that the United States of America and the Western countries are welcoming the new power, that's so naive that you think, okay, where were you? Haven't you learned from history that the way the United States are, and even the way they were involved with some of the political forces there, was also important. So that's a first mistake of assessing the situation, and it had as an impact where we are now in the situation. And no one can deny the fact that there were many mistakes. The second thing, which is also very important, is that when it comes to Egypt, contrary to the situation in Tunisia, and by the way, for those who think that the situation in Tunisia after what we call, once again, the beginning of the Arab Spring, if you look at what is happening now, we are far from witnessing a success. About the democratization process, we have forces from within that are coming back to the old regime, not in the same way in political terms, but everything which has to do with security, controlling the political dynamic there, it's a regression that we are witnessing. In Egypt, the problem is that during this period, it's as if we were not assessing the situation and not understanding the roles of the different players. In fact, just after Morsi was elected, I was asked to go back to Egypt and to come and to visit, and I say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to come because you are not running the country. In fact, it's not you. The country is in fact run, and still was run, by the army. And the army in Egypt was not only the security, it was not only the army, it was 60% of the economic sector. This was a corrupt regime controlling the economy. So thinking that if they are going to give up in such an easy way, thinking that, okay, now it's the not understanding who were the players, was something which once again was very naive. And then once again, understanding the dynamic under Morsi is something which is important. Why am I saying this? Because any one of you who studied what happened in Chile with Allende should understand that behind the so-called democratic process, the control of the country was done from outside from the economic sector, and this had to as an impact to prevent the country to moving on. So targeting the government, the leftist government, not through the economic, not through the democratic process, but the economic forces all around. That's exactly what happened in Egypt. If only we study history, understand that this was it. It was not Egypt for the United States of America, Egypt for the European countries, Egypt in the region. This had nothing to do with democratization of the country. It has to do with geostrategic and economic interests to be controlled in the region. Add to this the very central role of Egypt when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's the reality of it. So we also have to assess our understanding here and to understand why the situation in Egypt has nothing to do with the situation in Tunisia. In geostrategic terms, in economic terms, Egypt is so central in the picture that you have to add to your consideration things that are your analysis dimension that were so important, to the point that it would have been very important not only to study the situation and the role played by the army, but also the role played by the Salafi. And this is something which is so essential. The Salafi, up to 15 years ago, were quietists, meaning legalists. They were saying, we don't have to do with politics. In less than 8 months, they completely changed their rhetoric in a way which is very strange. And you know when it happened before? It didn't happen in Egypt first. It happened in Afghanistan, when you had people saying we are not involved in politics, and they were pushed from behind and they changed their political involvement. And all of a sudden, people who were saying, one of the leaders of Hizb al-Nur was saying, for us democracy was not halal or haram. Democracy for us was kufr. Okay, it's even deeper, it's even worse than that. Kufr means this is rejecting religion. And all of a sudden, in 8 months, not only they accepted and they pretended to accept the whole system, that they were involved within and playing the role of dividing the country and the religious discourse. Add to this, the state religious institutions, with Al-Azhar playing a very dirty role in the whole process, to the point that just after the coup d'etat, they were the first with the army to come and to support. And add to this, the Mufti of Egypt at that time, Ali Gom'a, at the time he was Mufti or no longer, he was still the Mufti, advising the army to, or not advising, giving a fatwa to the army, you have the right to kill. Idrab bil malyan. That's just unbelievable. So here we need to get a very deep understanding that the army, the West, or the Western power, within the army, within the religious forces and the division, the Salafi. And when I'm talking about the Salafi, I'm talking about whom? The same ideology that you find where? In Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, who is running Saudi Arabia? The Western allies. The same that you have in Emirates, saying, targeting all the organizations in the West, saying all these organizations are extremist organizations and they are working from the Gulf state. And the Gulf state are the allies of the West. The same. So if you don't understand the dynamic within, how, for example, the literalists are the objective allies of Western countries, even in our countries in the West. We don't get it. So we have to be, to get it, that there is something that in Egypt was revealing some of the dirty politics that we have when it comes to pushing the people one against the other and not really protecting the democratic principles that we are talking about. Now, once again, I would say that with all this and not getting this, I think that over the 1 year of Morsi's running the country, many mistakes were made, and very deep. Out of naivety, out of not taking into account the historical context, and thinking, for example, things that were quite naive, that the way they were involved in solving the situation in Gaza between Israel and Gaza, you remember that they were very instrumental. This was that they were getting the trust of the United States of America, and to the point that he thought, few weeks before being removed from power, that the United States were supporting them. So look, for 60 years they were supporting a country which was killing them, and putting them in jail, and all of a sudden they were trusted. I think this something which is quite worrying and troubling about how they would have thought so. And more than that, it's also the way they were dealing with the domestic issues and the foreign policies in the region. And this is something that it's important. In fact, beyond the divisions, and we had people who were playing, all the religious forces, add to this also the Coptic, who were worried about the situation, and they were playing a role of dividing the country by saying we are not involved. And I think that if you know the history of Egypt, this is where Morsi and the running party should have been very, very cautious with this unity within the country, understanding that they had to open up to all the forces. This should have been a situation which was not done enough, and also with this obsession of being acknowledged by the United States, by the European countries, and not focusing enough on real policies on the ground. Of course, in 1 year you cannot do this, but still you have to start. What is your economic policy? How are you going to deal with the surrounding country? What are you going to say about the state, and how are you going to deal with, in fact, the secularist forces? Because this polarization in Egypt was the end of the political discourse. This obsession that the secularist versus the Islamist is the only thing that matters. This is not politics. This is simplifying the political discourse where there is no economic policy, no educational policy, and more importantly, no way of dealing with the corrupt regime from within. This was not done. So at one point, if you don't deal with the deep state, this deep state is going to deal with you. And this is what happened. This is exactly what happened. And I would say here that, why am I saying this? Because I don't want you to understand that my very strong take on principles of freedom, dignity, and the democratic process is done without analyzing the mistakes and being critical to what happened, and critical towards the naivety of many of the people in the civil society that were supporting the Arab Spring and not being aware that they have to do more. You know, the main problem of all what happened in Egypt and in Tunisia, they know against whom they were, they didn't know for what they were. So the project was not clear. Oh yes, the dictator is that we don't want him. And by the way, this is, once again, if we had studied what happened in Eastern Europe with all these cyber dissidents, I'm mentioning this in the book with Serja Popovic, and the way, you know, Serja Popovic is the one who trained the cyber dissidents from 35 countries, among them almost all the Middle Eastern countries. You know who is paying this guy? You know who trained him first? And I was debating him in Dubai. I was saying, didn't you or haven't you been trained by somebody from the American army? He looked at me, he smiled, and said, yes, but he was retired at that time. Oh, thank you. Was retired. And then when the people came to some cyber dissidents say, were you not in touch with the CIA at one point? They say, yes, they came to us, but some of us, we refused to be trained by them, and some others went. So tell me, why did they come to you firsthand? Tell me, explain to me. So it means that they knew. Add to this, that in everything which has to do with Outport and Canvas, which is this organization in Eastern Europe, which is very instrumental, and in September, training cyber dissidents coming from the Middle East. Who was paying Canvas and still paying Canvas? Goldman Sachs. They don't have to, Goldman Sachs, they really care about democracy, as you know. Democracy and money. And more money than democracy. But at one point, if you look at this relationship between the economic sector and the finance and the banks, you get a better understanding that this was not as simple as the way we put it. So this is where I want us, when now we are coming to support the democratic process, to support freedom, to support, we need to come armed with all this knowledge that we had now about what happened. If not, we are starting again the same mistakes, and it's not going to work. So to sit down here and to be supporting democratic processes and principles means, please don't come with naive discourse, not argumented facts, and repeating, yes, we are with the Egyptian, while we made so many mistakes in the way we were involved in the discussion at the first place. So, for example, in the book that I wrote just when things were happening, saying, I don't see coming from the political forces in Egypt a real economic policy or economic vision. I don't see a clear understanding of how we deal with corruption. I don't hear, coming from the secularists, coming from the Islamists, a clear involvement in education at the grassroots level, because this is central. Don't speak about democracy if there is no education at the grassroots level. Don't speak about democracy if there is no social justice. Don't speak about democracy if you don't have a vision in the future of the regional stability. What was missing in everything that we were talking about in the Arab Spring was the South-South relationship. Obsessed with the states, obsessed with the great powers and even China, but not obsessed with trying to get a dynamic with Turkey, with Malaysia, with the other countries, the other players, the BRIC countries, having a vision here that at the regional level it's very important to understand that what the West wants is to divide and rule, what we need is to unite and face. That's the point. We don't have that. So here we have, if we are serious about Egypt, now we have to come with this overall vision, this comprehensive understanding of all this, and this is also what I want to bring to the table here, and try to be able also to deal with the way the army was playing, the secularists were playing, the Salafi and the Coptic community. Now, if you come to what happened, and this is the second part, and I will come to where we can come together, is once again the deep state was playing under the Morsi time when he was in charge. All this now, we know that it happened, and once again, if you study what happened in Chile, you will see that it's exactly the same. No electricity, no oil, no access to, and this was done from behind the scenes. So there were economic forces playing against the government. So now this is, and all of a sudden, after the coup d'etat, straight electricity came back, oil was there, and this was something that was done. So in fact, they were forces playing against the institutions, playing against the democratic process. And add to this, something that we can see now is the private sector and the people who are supporting some media, private media, the campaign. And to the point they were saying they are selling Giza, they were things that were completely crazy about what they were accusing the government of doing, but this was working. So the campaign and what we have now, it's true, nobody can deny the fact that lots of Egyptians were supporting the change, so they were asking for a change, because there was no electricity, no oil, and the media were bombarding them with the message that this has to change. So this is where you can see, once again, there could be no democratic processes in any country if we don't have also something which has to do with clear freedom of expression and not the media under the private sector, which is under the same corrupt people that are running the country. This is what happened in Egypt. So Sisi was not alone. Sisi had lots of people understanding if we change the political situation in Egypt, it means that we are going to be attacked as to the privileges of some private entrepreneurs and people who are corrupt within the regime, and they were ready to play for the army against any type of democratic process. And then came the coup d'etat, and as you know, by the way, in fact, at least 3 weeks before the coup d'etat, many signals were there knowing that something was going to happen. Even to the point that if you talk to people in Turkey, they themselves said, we told them it's going to happen. And the answers they got from the Egyptian government say, no, we control the situation, we are on track. Naive, not understanding what was happening, and then this was happening. So Sisi, all this discussion and all the things about, inflating the numbers, that there were millions and 30 million signing, all this was rubbish. This was not true, but it worked. And the image, all the image that you got coming from within Egypt about all these people were provided by the army that was behind the coup d'etat itself. So they were providing the agencies around the world with this and saying these are the numbers. Once again, the numbers were inflated, but we can't deny the fact that they were very powerful by changing the public opinion. Which means for us that we have to be cautious here with what it means to rely only on numbers and say at one point you can change the public opinion if you are controlling the media and controlling the economic sector. So, in fact, the only way for us is to say, if we are serious about democracy, it has to be institutionalized and we have to respect the institutions. If you play with the public opinion, anything could happen. Anything could happen in Egypt, but it also happened, remember what happened in Spain. Just before the elections, you remember that Aznar was normally going to win and he was running, and then what happened? Few days before the election, the terrorist attack in Madrid, and it changed everything. In 4 days, the whole public opinion changed. So with what we have, it can change. And we can see now in France that the way what happened could be instrumentalized, you can change the public opinion. So the only way for us in our countries, as well as in Egypt, is to say, respect the institutions, we have to be also very cautious with the media control and the economic sector. But what happened here is to say, look, the people were against Morsi, so the public opinion was against him, and once again, we have no evidence of the number, even though it's quite clear that they were not happy because the deep state and the private sector controlling the media was working against it. And the coup d'etat came. And what happened after the coup d'etat is not respecting the institution, putting people in jail, killing the people. Rab'a is a massacre. It's a massacre. They were ordered to kill the innocent people, and we had so many evidences of that, and then it has to do with coming back to the old regime, the military coming back, and the corrupt regime putting the people in jail, and this is what we have. as I told you at the beginning, the way it was portrayed is you are against ECCD. It means that you are for the Muslim Brotherhood, not saying that the people who were taking to the street were people who were supporting freedom, supporting dignity. Some of them were from the Muslim Brotherhood and others were from the civil society, and they were put in jail. And up to now, you have people from the April 6th that are in jail, people from the public, civil societies organizations who are in jail, and Muslim Brotherhood who are in jail. And whatever is our take on this, at one point we have to be serious with our principles. Yes, I'm finishing. She told me already, thank you. You know, I'm monitored as to the way, the time. I'm still Egyptian with time. I'm still Egyptian, by the way. What did I say? Where was I? You are not following? So they are putting people in jail from the civil society, and if you look at the situation, while the international community is silent, you have a judge in less than 25 minutes, he can just sentence to death more than 1,200 people. And we don't speak. And the world is silent. And then look at the situation is also, so the domestic policy coming from the ECCD now, it's no freedom, no dignity, no voice, and no opposition. So once again, it's worse than under Mubarak. What is even worse is the foreign policy, is Israel cannot dream a better ally in the region than a ECCD regime. So this is why we got, coming from the United States, coming from the European countries. European countries, just a few weeks ago, he was in London meeting Cameron. Before that, he went to the European Union. He is an ally of the status quo and even protecting the whole thing, destabilizing the Middle East and securing Israel. And this is the decision that were taken towards the people of Gaza is exactly what the Israeli government is expecting from an ally in the region. So it's not only within, it's outside. So if now you care about democracy, it's important to know what is happening within. But if you care about human dignity, it's also very important to understand what is happening in the region, because you cannot disconnect this from that. What is happening in Egypt within has to do with the very specific role Egypt is playing in the region. And this is why in the West, we know, and you know, you meet people, you meet politicians. I met people in Belgium, I met people in the States. They know what is happening, they know it's wrong. It's wrong. It's as if we are helpless, as if we cannot do anything. So this is where I think we have to be quite clear on the principle. And I know that sometimes, and especially for people who are speaking from within, we have to take clear stance on, once again, there are things that we have to acknowledge. Mistakes were made. The lack of a vision, a political vision, this is clear for me. We have to say things like this, that there are people who were in charge who are not understanding the reality. But once again, we have to stick to the principles and to stick to the democratic principles, and when it comes to respecting the institutions, as I said.
Je vais entendre répéter ce que vous venez de dire en français à propos du résultat de l'élection fédérale.
Vous voulez que je redise?
Oui, en français, s'il vous plaît. Juste préciser votre pensée. Vous dites que votre pensée sur le résultat de l'élection fédérale canadienne, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Pourquoi vous voulez que je répète? Parce que c'était pas clair en anglais ou c'est parce que...
Je vais prendre mes heures français pour absolument pas en français. Je sais que tu parles très bon français.
Vous devriez demander qui s'identifie, c'était vers nouvelle.
Monsieur. Non, je peux le dire en français. Ce que j'ai dit, c'est que vous avez élu un nouveau gouvernement et je pense que vous pouvez être content. Je pense que vous êtes content de ce nouveau gouvernement qui, sur le plan de la politique intérieure, appelle à plus de respect de la diversité, à plus de respect du pluralisme. Mais il faut en même temps que notre évaluation de ce gouvernement se fasse aussi sur la politique étrangère, où l'on reconnaisse le même droit à la dignité, à la justice pour toutes les populations étrangères. Et ça veut dire de poser à notre gouvernement la question de savoir quel est le soutien vis-à-vis de dictatures ou vis-à-vis, par exemple, du soutien à Israël qui serait fait sans la reconnaissance des droits légitimes de la dignité des Palestiniens à vivre et à avoir leur État. Et donc, ce que je voulais dire par là, c'est que ne vous suffisez pas de célébrer la victoire de Trudeau quant à sa politique intérieure, exigez que sa politique étrangère soit aussi juste et aussi promoteuse de principes que sa politique intérieure.
Merci.
You were talking at the beginning that to understand what happened in Egypt, we need to compare with other coups d'etat in other countries. My question is, can we compare what happened in Egypt to what happened in Turkey, for example, against people like Adnan Menderes or Negmuddin Erbakan? Or is that
Turkey?
Yeah, the coup d'etat in Turkey against Negmuddin Erbakan, 1997, or Adnan Menderes, 1960. Or that society in Turkey is it really different in terms of politics and social norms because of the Kemali Republic, so we cannot compare Egypt to Turkey.
Thank you.
So I have two questions. First, now we've been
You
in Egypt.
have to choose one.
I have to choose one. Okay.
Look behind you.
One is fine. So we in Egypt, we've been ruled by the military regime for over 60 years now. It's really entrenched in the system, and it has like transparent powers that the public don't know. As you said, like a small example, they can cut out the electricity or like do stuff like that to take out the power from a regime that they don't like. So in the future, if any president is elected who is an advocate of democracy, I believe he would be, in that sense, an adversary of the army, and in that sense, they can very easily ruin his campaign, ruin his economical campaign, or like any other the campaign that he set. They have the power to make the people hate him, basically. So in the future, how do you see democracy and a stable economic situation coming in harmony if the army is always there to just ruin the economical situation every time a democratical president is elected? Thank you.
Okay. So what I don't know if is he around. The first question that you asked about the book and you are here. Yes, you are here. So. No, that's fine. I was responding to you, and I wanted to know if you were still here. Look, I keep on repeating that when the people are saying we have to reform Islam, our take, and this is the reformist movement, is saying we have to reform our interpretation of the book. We are not going to change the book. So the reformist project is Tajdid Fahm in Nusus, which is how do we renew our understanding? And this is happening. It's an ongoing process. To the point that, for example, when it comes to how do we deal with what we called for years Muslim countries. And Muslim countries is a tricky way of dealing with a country. This is why 23 years ago, I decided that in the way I was going to talk about these countries, I was going to use a way of putting it, which is Muslim majority countries. Acknowledging the fact that these are not Muslim countries with nobody there that are, no, we have people of other faiths and people with no faith. So the way we have to deal with this is understanding the notion of citizenship and equal citizenship. Whatever is your religion, for example, Coptic and people of other faiths in Egypt, they should have the same civil rights.
And this is something that is important because you can't deny, if you know the situation in Egypt, that discriminations were there, that there is and was discrimination. Now, to justify this by saying it's impossible to come together, no. The people who were in Tahrir Square, Midan al-Tahrir, were also people, Christians were there, and they were even protecting the people when they had some. So we had people of different religious background. So what is important, it's also to be clear, and sometimes it's not clear enough, that we are talking about equal citizenship for all, and this ongoing process is there. Now, what you are saying is that some are worried about some interpretations of Islam, and I can understand this. I myself am worried when I listen to some Islamic interpretations of the text. So it's an ongoing process, it's a discussion, but if you study what is happening in contemporary Islamic studies, for example, you can see that there are new interpretations, new ways, and for example, even among the Islamists, some of them were saying, Muhammad Imara, when he wrote the book about the 25th of January, he was saying Islam, الدولة الإسلامية هي دولة مدنية. So saying that what we call the Islamic State in the term of the Muslim Brotherhood, not the Islamic State in Syria, that Daesh that we have now, is a civil state. And I think the notion of civil state is something which is important, is how do we deal with the society, and I think that this is something which is, these are questions to be put, and we have to push this analysis and these studies in a way which could also promote a clear discourse in Muslim majority countries. What is the status of minorities and religious minorities? And the classical discourse was not clear. It's not. And some interpretations were Dhimma and all this, it's not clear. We have to acknowledge this. So now we have to come with a clear discourse of equal citizenship for all. No difference of status. Whatever is your religion. And we have to build on this a discourse which is important. About what happened in other countries, yes and no. I think that, of course, the situation with Erbakan and with the secular state in Turkey is quite different. Yet, it's very important to understand that the way he was obliged to quit, and it's also something which has to do with internal forces playing against Erbakan at that point, and he had to leave. But I was not talking about Turkey during my discussion. I was even talking about the way Allende was treated by external forces. Like what happened in some African countries, and Lumumba, for example, the way they were removed from power through the political forces playing against them. We have to study this. And the way even, for example, this mobilization and popular mobilization that happened in Eastern Europe, the way this was playing against some of the rulers. But this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to study much more situation where, for example, great powers or big powers, or the United States and others were involved. About what was the last question? Yes, about the army today, and this is a deep question. It's a difficult question that you are asking, and you know what would be a true revolution in Egypt? A true revolution in Egypt will be to remove the army from any political role in Egypt. This would be a revolution. If you don't have this, it's not a revolution. It's just a structural redisposition. And this is why, I'm sorry, I know that you are using the term, but I never used revolution. For me, it was not thawra. That's why I was even speaking about an Arab awakening, that the people understood that at least we can change something. Something could be done. Yes, this is right. Now we have to go further. There will be no future in democratic terms in Egypt as long as the army is where it is now. So the true revolution is to say no. So now, is it going to happen? Not in the long run and the short run, but on the long run, this is why we have to ask our governments externally and people internally to work for that, which is remove and ask the army to go back to where the army should be, not running the country. That's the way forward. And this is what I would call a revolution.
On voit ce qu'on a vu à maintes reprises dans l'histoire, avec la Révolution française, la Révolution bolchevique, la chute de l'Empire romain, que les révolutions ne marchent pas quand elles ne sont pas soutenues par les puissants, que ce soit à l'intérieur ou à l'extérieur du pays. Il y a très peu de cas comme ça. Et avec les leaders d'un nationalisme arabe, je pense également à Nasser, qui aujourd'hui sont de moins en moins au pouvoir, comment vous pensez que le peuple arabe peut vraiment arriver à une indépendance à la fois idéologique, économique et bien sûr au niveau de ses ressources? Merci.
Yes. Thank you for the great lecture, and I'm sorry for coming late. It was a great pleasure to
Can you
to
speak
listen.
loud? Can you speak
It was a
louder?
great pleasure to listen to you, Professor. But I have a question. You define the deep state. You define that the Sisi regime is like all about violence, and you define that the Muslim Brotherhood representative Mohammed Morsi was elected democratically. Were there like research that support this? Was there like, is it true that this was a coup d'etat when like millions of people went to express their opinion that they don't want anymore the Muslim Brotherhood to rule? And do you think that the violence that the Muslim Brotherhood are now like expressing and doing, like today killing the judges who were like supervising the elections, are acceptable? I'm sorry to ask about this. I know that you are a person with high integrity. I know that you're coming from the founder, from the family of the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood. But please have like an open heart and mind and answer my questions about the definition of a coup d'etat and a revolution with the millions of people, and about the Muslim Brotherhood's regime in Egypt. And was it this, like the fairness, that this represents the fairness in your opinion? The violence?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What comes first, my integrity or I'm the grandson?
I think the integrity.
Okay, I will
As a
try.
professor, as a philosopher, as a like an eminent professor and a writer, and a great
No,
professor. I'm
I
sure
got
that
it. I got it. Thank you.
Okay, you mentioned about Sisi that he didn't come from nowhere, that he had been in a way prepared to take this role.
Can you speak louder?
Okay, all right. You mentioned that Sisi was prepared to take this role. Like he in a way, for 8-9 years, he had his involvement. And what really puzzles me, that he was appointed by Morsi. So can you explain to me the circumstances that made Morsi appoint Sisi to head the army?
Thank you.
Okay, let me come to, these are also important questions about, first, the revolution cannot succeed if they are not supported by the powerful, and then which type of involvement we can expect from the people to be able to change what is happening and to succeed in the process in Egypt. I think that this is where, in fact, it's very difficult if you look at the situation now, hoping that things would change and relying on the people in Egypt. I think that we need much more popular education, popular political awareness, and we need to have what I call a dynamic civil society. Today, we don't have a real civil society. Where are the intellectuals? Where are the politicians who are ready? And also the people who are working at the grassroots level to get that, and there is no real independence. And also because I was reading a paper here saying it's a failing state it's true that now we are facing an economic crisis in Egypt, which is very deep. The situation is very difficult in Egypt now on many levels. So how we can work on that? I would say that once again, as much I think that we need forces working from outside, supporting the democratic processes and having principled positions. We need from within much more involvement coming from within the Arab societies. We need Egyptians now being ready to face this and also to avoid this polarization between the secularists versus the Islamists that is used by the government and the army to divide the country. And it has been the case for so many years. So at the end, this polarization is paralyzing the political discourse with no vision, and we don't see anything coming from the countries. So I'm sorry, it cannot be the case that in the Arab world now, this is the only region in the world where it seems that we are between the status quo and the disorder and the mess that we have now. And we blame the West for this, but at one point this is where we need also to, or we should expect from the people to have new dynamics, and you have new voices coming from within. And I would hope to see people relying on principles to come together. Because I met people who are secularists, I share with them so many principles, and at the end this vision that it's us versus, the Islamic State versus the secular state, this is very simplistic now. And I think that once again, this is where it's important to try to find a third way, so to speak, in order to come with a new political discourse from within and coming from the people from within as well as from outside. What you are saying about the Muslim Brotherhood, if you read all what I have been writing over the last few years, I'm very critical. And even, the students, the Oxford students, they invited Morsi before he was elected, when he was the new president of the political party. And I asked him 6 questions. I was very disappointed. There are 2 things that I can say about Morsi. As a person, intellectually speaking, and personally, the only thing that I saw out of him is that he was an honest person. We disagree with this, but that's not the point. This is my opinion. Let me finish. As a politician, I think that to be equipped to be the president of Egypt, I don't think that this was the right person to be. And it's not because you are mukhlis in ethical terms that you are equipped in political. That's my opinion. And I think that, but yet, he was elected. Now, no, but when you are elected, you are elected. You don't change. You cannot be with the democratic process when it suits you and say we remove the people when we don't like them. That's not democracy. Because now you are questioning the elections themselves. So you think that the elections of the CC were more transparent. Okay, so this is where we disagree. I'm trying to be, and don't, please. You know why I asked you the question about my honesty and the grandson? Because if I disagree with my answer, don't come by saying, but I know you are the grandson. Okay, we agree on that. So what I'm saying now, it's when it comes to millions of people taking to the street, I'm not denying this. I'm even saying that yes, it might be that more than half of the country was unhappy with them running the country. Many mistakes were made. Add to this that what I said about the deep states, the cutting the electricity, was also objective facts, that forces from within were playing against the democratic process. And this was done. So we have to take this not by saying it was a complete failure, but also to understand that other forces were playing against. And this is why the people were so upset and not happy, saying, look, It's even worse than under Mubarak because we don't have electricity, there is no oil, there is no gas, there is nothing. And we cannot eat. So there are objective factors that were playing against the democratic process. And as I said, the media and the private sector working on this. So we have to take this also into account by assessing the failure. Now, about the second thing that you are saying, by violence. Look, that's not new. Gamal Abdel Nasser said it. Mubarak said it. Sisi saying it. In fact, to dismiss the Muslim Brotherhood, to say they are violent and irhabiyin, and this on facts, it's not proven and it's not right. It's not right. So if you will be better in the political discussion, not accepting this manipulation coming from Sisi, say the Muslim Brotherhood might be wrong, we have to challenge, we have to argue, we have to dismiss the arguments, but not by accepting the fact that the Sisi is saying, I am legitimate because these people are extremists. No, you are a dictator and they have the right to be within the society, and as elected people, even though you think it was not transparent. And by the way, I also said this myself. You say, you know, the majority in Egypt to be the president was not more than 30%. It's still not the majority of the people. So you have to keep this in mind, that you are elected by the majority, but the majority of the people who elected you are a minority within the society. So you can't just say, oh, I'm representing everybody. Yeah, that's not true. So I agree with you that these are things that have to be taken into consideration. But please, don't go as far as to buy the rhetoric of a Sisi saying all the people who are against me are extremists. That's not true. And even what is happening in the Sinai, what is happening now in many, had nothing to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. And the first, how do you know that it has to do? No, we know for one thing which is clear, what all the positioning coming from the Muslim Brotherhood were calling for non-violence for the last 60 years.
But there is a research that says for the communication.
Yes, coming from a CC or coming from the states?
That the words that count 7% in the communication, but actions, behaviors, and even the tonality of the voice, like, counts more.
No, the tonality of the voice is not extremism.
I will ask you to please, and let's give other people the chance. I think
Anyway, we can discuss this, but I would say my only point here is that this rhetoric coming from the dictators to say my opponents are extremists is something which is known and was used. And I would say, having been in the opposition for 60 years in a non-violent way, it's very difficult to think that all of a sudden now they are becoming extremists. And again, it's the same rhetoric. So I think for a deep and effective political discussion, let us come to facts and let us come to what was done through the institutional process, why it was stopped, and in which way we have to deal with a dictator. My only question to you, you don't have to answer now, but no, you don't have, but is a Sisi a dictator or not? No. I'm going to play the journalist. Yes or no? He's not. That's fine. This is the starting point of our disagreement. If a Sisi for you is not a dictator, with the way he is running the country, we don't have the same appreciation of what is a democracy.
We were fighting for democracy, but we were not ready for it.
Okay. Can you imagine? But this is very deep and it is very important. I'm not challenging you here, but what you said, what he said, this is something that we have to think about it. It says, to say to a country, you're not ready for democracy, that's deep.
You know why? Because for 30 years we didn't have political parties and we didn't have diversity in the political parties. So there was
That's not wrong. That's not wrong. I agree with this. But not being ready for democracy, no, If you are not ready for democracy, it means you are ready for dictatorship. That's a problem as well.
Suggest we move to the next question.
Let me just thank you. Let me thank you for coming, asking the questions, staying and arguing, because I think that this is the starting point of a dialogue. We disagree, but you are here, and this is good. And I thank you for that, and I want all of us to understand that that's good. Because you knew by coming, you knew that we were going to disagree. Anyway, so the last question about Morsi, yes, that's exactly the problem, that in fact, two things were important. Internally, what we know now is that even the American administration with the Mubarak regime and the people within the army under the authority of Mubarak was not very happy. And starting with his own son, Gamal Mubarak, was a problem for them, and they didn't want him to come. Now, the fact that he was trained in Egypt, went to the state, trained to the state in the state, wrote something very, very, very interesting. The thesis that Sisi wrote about the way Islam should be involved in politics. It's as if he was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And then what we knew from him being appointed is he was. You know that his wife was trained in Islamic terms by Morsi's wife for months. So, in fact, he was very naive in the way he trusted Sisi by appointing him, thinking that he was very much involved in the religious thing, and this had nothing to do with this. His wife wearing the niqab, going to the mosque with his wife. She got Quranic lessons by Morsi's wife. All this is things that were now they are documented in the way he was completely naive and misled by this appointment. And then it's only afterward that people started to go to the biography, Sisi's biography, and you see that he was in Sharm el-Sheikh, he was in the discussion about Irhab, he was there already, and he was trained and also in connection. And by the way, during the last 4 months, where the Egyptian administration said we cut the relationship with Israel, he was the only channel between Egypt and Israel. Who said that? Not me. Who documented this? New York Times, coming and saying he was in touch with the Israeli over the last few months of the Morsi administration before it was removed. So we also have to get the connection internally and externally.
You mentioned the Western forces that were at play in the Second Revolution or whatever, I don't know, Morsi going to the Gulf states begging for money, not receiving it, the sort of Gulf media, the Iraq shit, what takes place is all.
Can you speak louder, close to the mic?
Okay, sorry, it's much better. What role do you think the forces in Egypt played in ousting Morsi, aside from the way they removed him as a criminal, first, and second, the sort of post after he was removed, after the 30th of June, the bombings that occurred on Coptic churches. What role did the government play in that? Do you think the Brotherhood was really a credible actor in those? And
credible what?
A credible actor. Do you think they were responsible for those attacks? I can see the relevance, quite frankly. And also, what do you think would have been the effect of Morsi's stay in power?
The effect of?
Like, had Morsi remained in power.
Ah, okay.
Had the Second Revolution not gone to fruition.
So at the end you got your second.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Professor. My question is, what can we young people do to promote democracy and combat extremism in the Middle East? Also in our home countries, and is there anything we can do?
Thank you.
Hi. Well, we all know what happened in France about.
I'm sorry.
We all know what happened in France about a week ago, and since then, a lot of politicians or media are talking about war on terrorism. Well, I think there are some the real reasons why it happened, such as leaving a lot of their own citizens a side in their country which creates terrorists, and interfering in Arab countries, for example. And so it makes me pretty hopeless about what's coming, because I feel like they're not treating the question well. So I wanted to know what's your take on this, and how do you think it's going to be in the future? Thank you.
Hello, Professor. I'm a big fan of you. My question is...
and then comes the tough question.
Oh, it's just us. You mentioned that the West has influenced on what happened in Egypt. But don't you think that the real problem is the Arabs or themselves? They're just the one who are separated and diverted. And what do you think is the solution if the West really doesn't support what happens in Egypt? Nobody, what is the solution? Can we do something ourselves if nobody's helping us? Thank you.
Nobody is helping us. Who is this us?
The Arabs.
The Arabs?
Yes, the Arab. Like Egypt.
No, it's not the same. The Egyptians or the Arabs?
Egyptians.
So the us is the Egyptian.
Yes.
So nobody is helping the Egyptian.
Yes.
Okay. Are you thinking about the Syrians, for example, are not helping the Egyptian?
Yeah, basically on what's happening on Tunisia or Yemen or Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Look, about what the question about what was happening just after with the violence in the Sinai and violent actions that and the government saying that this is coming from the Muslim Brotherhood. Once again, we don't have evidences of who was behind this, and if you think about the whole recent history, and once again what I was saying, the rhetoric from the successive governments and dictators by saying all the people are against me. We know now that, for example, even Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1955 manufactured an attack against himself to get popularity. This is what we have now, the people who are involved in it, who wrote the book by saying I was with the American manufacturing an attempt against Rais just to also so it could be that this again was done because it would have been very silly for the Muslim brothers to do this. Now these are things that are rumors that are also promoted by the government, knowing that at the same time we cannot dismiss the fact that you can have individuals doing things on their own, and this is also something that happened in history. But I wouldn't go as far as to say this was the violent response. I think that what we got over the months after the coup d'etat is using this and using this violence by saying we are dealing with extremists. This was the only way forward, by saying these people are extremists, they are not Democrats, we are now protecting the country. About what would have happened with Morsi if he had remained in charge, I don't know. And I would say once again, to remain in charge with the role of the army from behind the scene would have been, a potential failure. So would it be possible, would have been possible for him to act or to behave or to take decisions against the army? I don't think so. I think that this is why, to tell you the truth, I said to many people, even with people who are social activists, I say, don't go for power now. There is a transitory period which is needed to come and to run the country. It's just a very, very dangerous now because you don't have the means. So it might be better sometimes to be a counter power than to be a power, and you are going to be in power, and That was my position, which once again, I also said this in Palestine by saying, be careful not to have an authority without power, or to be in power with no authority. Because this is exactly what the Israeli was putting. They were putting people in power with no authority, or the opposite. You have the power, but you have no authority. Everything is in the hands of the Israeli, and then you lose your credibility by failing. So this is also a way they are undermining a long history of credibility coming from being in opposition also. About yes, what we can do to promote democracy from where we are. Once again, I think that you are here today, you come to a talk. What I keep on repeating to Western fellow citizens is, please be informed. Please get some knowledge about what is happening, and don't accept the media coverage, the simplistic way things are presented, and the very, very superficial rhetoric that you have. Don't accept this, and be informed. The best way to support democracy there is to be informed here, and to inform the people around you. So you come to this talk here, you're having many activities that you're organizing, so we need networks, we need people within our society working from where we are, and then to start. And it's very simple at one point, but I want to repeat this. I said it in my conclusion, but it's it's the starting point of our discussion here. Are we serious about the fact we have equal dignity? Are we serious about the fact that we have equal value? Are we serious about the fact that democracy that we are now experiencing here should be also the opportunity that other populations should have? Are we serious about this? Yes or no? And if we are serious, we have to be courageous enough to talk to our fellow citizens, to talk our local authorities, to talk about our governments by saying, be consistent with the principles, and to be vocal. So if you, students or activists in the West, you are not the voice for the voiceless in the South, if you differentiate yourself, tell me something. I think you are not accepting at all as something which is unacceptable when somebody is telling you, if there is a refugee coming and I'm selecting him or her according to his or her religion, you would say, or his or her color, you would say, no, never. Or his or her opinion, you would say, never. I say, the refugees are people that we have to support by definition. So why is it that we accept from where we are to sometimes be vocal about some prisoners or tortured people in jail, and we differentiate between the people who think like us and people who think not like us? That's just not dignified. Torture is torture. It's not acceptable. Innocent people having their political opinion, and whatever is their opinion, as long as they are not killing innocent people, should be free to speak, and we have to promote freedom for all. So be consistent with your own value. But we are vocal when we are following the media and supporting some and forgetting others. They are, even in your country, by the way, you know that in Canada today, in the United States today, there are people in jail, they are innocent. And some in the United States are under solitary confinement, innocent. In Guantanamo, after 8 years, innocent. And we don't speak because they are Muslims, or they were coming from a very remote region and countries. That's not acceptable. So the best way to promote democracy is to be consistent with our principles for every single human being, and to come together. And it starts in this room, and it starts in your daily life. Now, the war, no, just try to implement that instead of clapping when you hear it. we have to be committed to this. And the war on terror, you were saying you are quite hopeless. All this business and the war on terror and to interfere in other countries, once again, that's not new. That's the reality of the great powers to interfere and to instrumentalize and to find pretext and to try to find a narrative, a rationale that is helping why we are doing this. So yes, we are going to Afghanistan, not because there is lithium there or gas or oil, no, because we want to free women. We are going to Libya not because we want to protect oil there, no, because we want to free the country from this dictator Gaddafi. The same with Saddam. All these are lies, and we all know this. But where we should not lose hope is that at one point from where we are, we can work on public opinions. We can work at the level, what I like, for example, in the work done by Canadians for Justice and Peace is to say, look, we are Canadians, but justice is for us and for others. It's peace, there will be no peace without justice. So now we have to get it right. We understand your policy, we understand what you are doing, but we are not naive. We are citizens with consciousness, with principles, and we are ready to fight the fight in the name of the principles and in the name of justice and dignity. So it's not to sit down and say, yes, okay, at the end, if only you think about changing things and you want results, it's not going to work. If the thing is do as much as you can, but do it. Do what you have to do, and as you know, at the end, I'm sorry, sometimes, you know, I'm a university professor, and I'm here in university. At the end, what do you want? You want a degree? You want to be called doctor and professor for what? What's the point? You want a salary, or do you want to be dignified, principled, courageous, human beings for the sake of human beings? What do you want with your titles? To use them or to serve with them? And at the end, you know, how do you want to think? To think following the mainstream and what is said in the media, or to be independent, courageous, and to serve with your mind? And it means that this is where, if you are hopeless, this is exactly what the powerful want you to be. Lose your hope and they win. Keep your hope and the struggle is there and you can win. So this is where we have to come together, and this is, by the way, why we are doing all and giving all these lectures. That's only for that. This is the reality of it. I still have 3 minutes. No, I still have very quickly because so this is okay, let me just finish with this, just to respect the question that I had here. So not to be, and there are two last questions. The West. So I was, and I don't want you to get the impression, I said this during my talk, that yes, I'm blaming the West, I'm trying to assess what is done by Western countries, but the question was, what is the responsibility of the Arabs? And of course, this is something which is critical. You know the problem of what we call the Arab Spring. If you were to study, and I said this in the book, The Arab Spring, by the way, many understood that it was only the analysis of what was happening on the ground. It's deeper than that. I was trying to deal with the challenges. One of the main challenges is exactly what happened in Tunisia, in Egypt. If you looked at the political actors in the region, they were very much obsessed with the national challenges. Egyptian for Egypt, Tunisian for Tunisia, Libyans for Libya. And the point is that we have to start to think outside the box. It's how these countries should work together. The problem of the Arabs is this accepted, nurtured divisions and fragmentation of our commitment to principles, to the point that Egyptians here are coming to promote Egypt, and very often we don't go when it comes to other countries. So for example, Syria today, this is why we have also to be involved. So we need to have a consciousness which is wider than our country. So this is why I asked you, who is this us that you are talking about? You know, I'm troubling many of the people that when I'm talking in the West by saying us. I say, us? Yes, us Europeans, us Westerners. So with my face, that's worrying. Say, something is changing. Yes, us is, and then when I come to the Arab countries, what I want is this us to be not only the Arabs, it's all the region in the Middle East, because it's not only Arabs, by the way, Iranians are not Arabs, but this is where we need to come with a consciousness which is beyond the borders, because the future of this process towards populations freeing themselves from dictators has to be transnational. No way to get it in one country. It is transnational. We need to have a South-South collaboration, which is not happening now. If only the Gulf states were helping with all the money, the other countries in the region, instead of putting the money in Western banks, this would help. But this is not the project. The project is divide and rule and push them one against the other. So this is exactly what we have now with the destabilized Middle East. So the Arab consciousness should come with something, and even with people of other faiths. You know, I see much more Southern consciousness coming from Latin American rulers than coming from Arabs, because they have the vision that it's going to come from us in the South. We have to work together. We have to work together, and not to only be obsessed with our country versus the West. We have to break this obsession. It's us and the North. It's us, and this us, we have to reassess it. So I would say that Egyptians now, and all of us as people who care about principles, we have to come together and to be able to work onto something which is our shared principles beyond our nations, beyond our. So this is why I'm very much involved in anything which happened in Tunisia. I was banned from Tunisia because I decided I will never accept to support or to be silent about the dictator. As a Swiss citizen, by the way. And if I'm here, it's not because I'm coming from Egypt. I care about the principles, I care about Egyptians because I care about humanity. So we have to go beyond our very narrow national struggle to understand at the end of the day this is where we have to come together. And you, coming from where you come and being now Canadians or resident in Canada, you need to call your fellow citizens to the principles that we are sharing, not as an Egyptian speaking about Egypt because you come from Egypt. No, as a human being speaking about principles because you care about humanity. That's to be a witness. That's to be, this is the only thing that I understand. Me as a Muslim, لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, to be witness before human being is, let us come to our shared principles. Racism against the black people is not a question for the black, it's a question for humanity. Racism against Jews, racism against Muslims is not about Muslims. Discriminations about women, it's not a women business, it's our business. And discriminations and dictatorships against the southern countries is not the business of the southern countries. It's our business as human beings. You know, this is where you need to start the intellectual revolution that is needed, not to make it nationalistic, but to make it a humanity concern. Thank you.